Hey friends, are you wondering how much money you should be making per week or per month as a handyman and how much you should be charging per hour? That's exactly what we're going to be getting into on this episode of the Handyman Journey. Hi friends, my name is Alan Lee, owner and operator of the Handyman Journey here in Sacramento, California, and the sole mission of the Handyman Journey is to equip people just like you how to start a handyman business or take their current handyman business to the next level. Today we're going to be talking specifically about the age-old question of how much I should charge as a handyman and how much I should be making per week or per month. Now this is a huge topic. We've been talking a lot about it on our Facebook group, which is the Handyman Journey Mastermind group on Facebook. If you're not part of that, go ahead and join that. I will put a link in the description below to join that. We would love to have you. But we've been talking about, how much we should be making per hour, per month, per day, things like that as a handyman. And the question is very hard to answer for every single person because the economy changes so rapidly and so differently from area to area around the US or around the world. So we got a guy that is in Florida that his aim is to make $650 a week. And then we got people in California that maybe their range is to make, $2,000 or $3,000 a week. People in the middle might be making $5,000, maybe even $10,000 a week. It depends on your numbers. So the biggest thing that you need to do as a handyman is figure out what your hourly need needs to be. That's the biggest thing overall, and that's really what the answer to that question is, and that's where that lies, is figuring out what your hourly need is as a handyman. And over at handymanjourney.com, I got a course where I explain specifically about this and give you guys the documentation to figure out what your hourly need is as well. But I'm gonna kind of run that through real quick and give you kind of the rough and dirty on that so you guys could take some notes and figure that out for yourself. You're gonna need to write down all of your expenses to start with, okay? And if you are a sole proprietor, you're gonna need to figure out what your expenses are as a person and figure out how your handyman business can afford that, basically. If you're moving further into something like an LLC or an S-Corp and stuff like that, you're gonna need to figure out what your business overhead is. But for those of you that are just starting out, you're pretty much probably gonna be a sole proprietor. So you're gonna need to figure out what your numbers look like in the sense of your own personal finances, because you are the person who basically gets all of the money from the business, besides taxes and things like that. So you're gonna need to create a spreadsheet, write down all of your expenses. So, and this also depends if your wife works or not, if you're married, if you're a single person. If you have a wife and maybe she's a nurse and she's bringing in a whole bunch of money and you don't necessarily need your income, then these numbers completely change. But if your wife, say, is a stay-at-home mom and you are the sole breadwinner in your family, you're gonna need to pay very close attention to these numbers. You're gonna need to write down, expenses like mortgage, groceries, gas, electric, health insurance, garbage, phone, all the, giving, car insurance, life insurance, registration, all this stuff, and then how much you want to put in savings and stuff like that, and write out everything that you spend money on per month. Now this is, if you don't have a wife or if your wife is a stay-at-home mom and doesn't bring in any income into the family, you're going to need to cover all of these expenses with your handyman business. So it's very important to list out every single one. I have a list here of about 20 different expenses that I always recommend to start with. And then so that's your personal expenses. Then you're gonna need to figure out what your business expenses are. And that would include things like a business phone, truck registration, general liability insurance, advertising, taxes, licensing fee. If you're putting money into a 401k or a SEP IRA, tax prepare, how much does it cost to prepare your taxes? Giving, truck gas. I'm a big proponent on giving. I believe that we should tithe the 10% of our gross income. Give that back to the community, give that back to people in need, whether that is a church, whether that's an organization that you feel strongly about. I think that is an important aspect of this business, is giving back to the community. Okay, so once you figure out that, all of your expenses, you're gonna have a number, okay? And then you're gonna take that number and you're gonna need to add 20% to that number. And this first 20% is what I call the business development break-even number. So it's a 20%, kind of an unknown figure. This is just to account for maybe certain jobs lost, certain jobs that take a little bit longer than we originally thought. Maybe materials were more expensive than we originally thought. So it's covering 20% like unknown, or maybe that maybe that general liability insurance payment or that workers' comp insurance payment that we kind of forgot about, or that truck registration that we didn't put into here. So the 20% kind of gives us a little leeway to make sure that we get our expenses covered. So you take that number of all your expenses, you add 20% onto it. That's your business development break even. So if you had every single thing in your expense category and you don't need that 20%, then that's awesome. Then that now turns into your business development, and that's money that you can set aside for business development. If not, then it's a break-even number. It's just covering your expenses. And then after that, you're gonna add 20% on top of that number, which is your profit. 20% profit. I always recommend to aim for 20% profit or more, and this assures that you can get that, okay? So you're gonna have your break-even number, you're gonna have your 20%, and then you're gonna write down how many average hours per month you typically work. Now, if you're just starting out, you're not gonna know how many hours per month you work, but if you've been doing this for a month or two, you might have a good idea of it. Probably a good thing to do is, shoot for, 60 to 70%. So that means if you're working an 8-hour workday, you're probably gonna be billing, 5.5, 6 hours, something like that. Because you have to allocate time for picking up materials, writing estimates, things like that. So you might have, 75 to 100 hours in a month that's actually working hours, that's billable hours, okay? And then you're gonna need to divide that, and then you get your dollar per hour. So the dollar per hour is based on how many hours you typically work per month, and then what your 20% profit plus your 20% break even plus your expenses is. So you might come up with something, and it's different for your area, it's different for your expenses, so it's hard to give an exact amount that say, hey, you should aim for this as a handyman, because it's different in every single area of the world. So your dollars per hour might come out to $20 per hour, your dollars per hour might come out to $60 per hour, your dollars per hour might come out to $80 or $100 per hour. It's definitely reliant on your expenses and also your community and where you live. And then, so that's another thing. After you figure out this dollars per hour, you really need to sit down and look at maybe the comps in your area, just like you would do if you're buying a house, right? You look at buying or selling a house, you look at the comps in your area to find out what other houses are going for, selling for, or buying for, and find out what other handymen are charging in your area, and say your number comes up with $75 an hour. And other handymen you find are charging around $40 to $45 an hour. Then you might need to figure out a way to maybe lower that hourly rate or bump up your experience level, bump up your value that you are bringing to your client, because clients will pay for value. So there's always a way to get the money that you need to get, and we want to show you exactly how to do that. So it's important to know these numbers, and really the conversation goes now from how much should I charge per hour to how many hours will this job take, right? Because if you know how many hours a job takes, you can plug that into this expense spreadsheet and figure out how much dollars per hour you should make on that job. So if you know that your dollar per hour for your break even, your dollar per hour for your profit is say $20, and this job's going to take you 4 hours, then you know how much to charge for that job. And I would recommend probably not charging by the hour, like not telling the client, say, hey, I charge 20 bucks an hour. We're just gonna go till we get this thing done. You could definitely do that. That's a great way to start if you don't have any idea of like how long jobs take. But if you have any idea of how long a job takes, and say you think a job will take you 4 hours, then you can say, hey, my hourly rate is $20 an hour, so I'm gonna try and bid that job for $100. So that you're making a little bit more profit on that job than you would be if you were charging hourly. And on this spreadsheet, I also recommend writing out what your expense dollar per hour is, what your 20% unknown or break-even value dollar per hour is, and then what your 20% profit dollar per hour is. That way you have $3 per hours, and you know exactly how much. So if you end up doing a job that takes you longer than you originally thought, and say you made $22 an hour, but you look at your expense was $20 an hour, you still made $2 an hour over your expenses on that. You would definitely like to get into that 20% profit dollar an hour range, but if you don't, you're not beating yourself, So it's very important to figure that out. That, I believe, is ultimately the end goal. But I think, so as a handyman, you should try and get at least what you were getting from your old job that you left before. I know, the guy I'm talking about, Brian Davis in Florida, he aims to get what he got out of his old job. That's awesome, but you also have to figure in self-employment taxes and things like that, and general liability insurance. There's a lot of expenses that go into owning your own business rather than just working for a guy. So, important to know your numbers. You always want to calculate. That's the only way to make sure that you're making enough money. A lot of people, they just throw numbers out there and hope that they're making enough money, but you have to actually figure out what your expenses are before you actually know that you're making a profit at the end of the month. So, very important. If you guys need more information on this, go check us out over at handymanjourney.com. We would absolutely love to get you plugged into the course for this pricing program. But this has been a little bit of tutorial of how much to charge per hour as a handyman and how much you should make per month or per week. I would probably say, anywhere from whatever you need. If you need $500 per month, that's awesome. If you need $5,000 per month, that's awesome. But you need to figure out your expenses and what your need is. So I know I didn't directly answer that question, but it lies in your expenses. It's different for every person. So I'm leaving you guys here and saying you guys got some homework to do. Figure out what your expenses are and how much you need to make per month to make it as a handyman. Thanks for tuning in to the Handyman Journey. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. We'll see you on the next one.